Hey guys, it's Bella, and in this video we are going to be reading through the 8th leaf of the Skeireins, and this is the very final leaf. So if you've made it this far in the series, congratulations. And as usual with this series, if you want to have a go at translating this yourself, feel free to pause the video, write out your translation, and then you can check your translation against what I say in the video. So let's get on with reading this. Ens hun uslagida ana ina handuns at wiche ok is machte una nasione va unseilin ide noch diskerandin yachni us loviandin formel sik gahavan. So what does this mean? Ens hun uslagida ana ina handuns is relatively simple. It means anyone uslagida laid ana ina upon him handuns their hands. So someone laid their hands upon him, and this him is referring to Jesus, of course. So this next clause is somewhat complicated. At wiche ok is machte. And then I think this wiche ok machte goes with diskerandin and usloviandin. There's a couple of problems with this passage that make it difficult to interpret. So the main problem is that there's no verb really, there's no indicative verb, but that's not really necessary because of this prepositional construction involving at and involving two present participles basically. But the problem with those present participles is that, like wiche and machte, they are both singular feminine datives. So those two present participles are diskerandin and uslobiandin. Like I said, both of these are singular dative feminine present participles. And therefore they could go with at wiche machte, which would mean with his holy power, sort of not permitting uslobiandin and dispersing, diskerandin. It could mean that, but the problem is this word here, unseilin, can be accusative and it can also be dative. So it could mean with his power and the unholiness of them dispersing and not allowing. So based on context, I've interpreted this unseilin as being an accusative rather than a dative, which would mean that the sentence would read, somebody laid their hands upon him with, indeed, his holy power invisibly still dispersing their unholiness and not allowing the unholiness to possess them for a while. That's how I think this is working. So this here is an accusative infinitive construction, and I don't think it's the sick. I think it's unseilin that triggers this. So what it is from at to gahavan is we have indeed with his holy power still invisibly dispersing their unholiness and not allowing their unholiness to possess them for a while. That's what I think is going on there from start to finish, although the syntax is a bit difficult to parse. And if you have a different interpretation of how this should be translated, do let me know in the comments. So on to the next one. Galithum van the anbachtos duthim ochumistam guriam jach phariseum, farach quethun du im yenene. Duchwe ni atochothina, anhofun van the anbachtos quithandans, fatini honhun ravorida manas vaspe samana. So this is all a quote from the Bible, and it's relatively therefore simple to get through. We'll tackle the first sentence first. Galithum fan the anbachtos duthem ochumistam gudiam jach phariseum. The anbachtos is those servants then departed. Galithun duthem ochumistam gudiam, to those highest servants, jach phariseum, and to the Pharisees. Tharach quethun duim yene. Wherefore they spoke to him Yeyene. This is an interesting case of reduplication in Gothic, and it just means this is the Yeyene is a sort of unusual form of the masculine nominative plural form of the adjective jens, meaning those men. So, wherefore those men spoke to him. Duhwe ni atochos ina. Why do you all not bring him in at tochoth? Anhofen van the anbachtos quitandans. Then those servants, quitandans speaking, Anhofen, they answered, Thati ni juanjun eu rodida manna, swaspe sa manna. That never ni juanjun eu rodida manna did a man speak, swaswe, just as sa manna, that man. So the servants went to the Pharisees and said, Why haven't you brought him in? And the Pharisees are saying about Jesus, it's because they've never heard anybody speak like Jesus does. Soch dan anderhaft du gesachte, mesoch dan du afdomine jenese ungalovine warth. So this means, we'll do the first clause here. Soch dan anderhaft du gesachte. And then that Anderhafts is an argument. Du Gesachte is, or rather, Anderhafts answer, and then Du Gesachte for the argument. Mesuch is greater one, and it is feminine, so it goes with Soch and Anderhafts, and it's also nominative, so that's how we know that it goes with it. So it's the answer which is greater, and the verb here is warth, which means it grew. So it means then that answer grew bigger, is what that all means. Du avdomine jenese, for the condemnation of them, ungalovine, in disbelief. So what this means from start to finish is then that answer grew greater for the argument then towards the condemnation of those men who are in disbelief. That's what that passage means. Anhofen ok jenna anna hetandam in thesi ni atochun inna. Ni ansitandans jenese unselin, these anna hetandane Ac mes sildalikjandans frojens lessin suikonthava in allem allamannam fordawissan rachnidedu. So, anhofen ok jenem and hetandam is, however, they answered, ok anhofen jenem and hetandam to those men summoning him. So this, I believe, is, or the ones perhaps accusing them is maybe a better translation for anahetandam. In thesi ni atochun ina, on account of this which they did not bring him in, basically atochun ina. So this is the Pharisees and the high priests responding to those who are sort of accusing them, answering why they haven't brought Jesus in. Ni and sitandans jenese unselin. So I think what this is unsitandans is sort of sitting upon, basically. So not sitting upon the unholiness of those men, jenese unselin, but I think maybe better translation is not shrinking away from the holiness of those men. These anahetandaneim, of these men accusing them or summoning him. Ac mes silla likiandans frojens lessin, but rather, silla likiandans is a really fun word, and it's sort of marveling, basically. Lessin frojens, marveling at the Lord's teaching, svit lessin. Suikonthava in alamanam, openly, among all of humanity or in all societies. Fordawisan rachnidedun, they reckoned it to be superior, because these are accusative infinitive constructions. And actually, the Gothic here is doing a good job of contrasting two different states. So we have the unselenjenese, these anhetanane in. So we have an accusative and genitive, red and green. And we also have a red and green here, Freund's Lessin. And therefore, the accusative infinitive construction, which is triggered by this fordawisan here at the end, could actually apply to both of them. So what this would mean is that openly, those men who were marveling reckoned the unholiness of those men who were accusing him, accusing Jesus, or accusing them. So yeah, that's not him, who were sort of, accusing them, the Pharisees. This could mean that the Pharisees were reckoning the unholiness of those men, accusing them for their son to excel or to surpass, like, everything. Or they could say that the teaching of the Lord, less in Freund's, for our son, is preeminent in alem alamanam, in the whole world. So this sentence can have one or two different translations, and I'll go from start to finish. I'll give you both of them. So, however, they answered to those men accusing them, on account of that which they did not bring him in, not shrinking from the unholiness of those men who were accusing them, but rather marveling at the teaching of the Lord. They openly reckoned that the unholiness of those men accusing them was preeminent in all of humanity, and that the teaching of the Lord was preeminent among all of humanity. So there we go. That's the two options for how we can interpret it. And the Gothic here is ambiguous, but I think that that's a deliberate choice. And I think we saw in, I believe, chapter 4 of the Skeireins, we see a similar use of contrasting in terms of the grammar of Gothic being used to contrast John the Baptist and Jesus. So I think this is a deliberate rhetorical tactic that the Skeireins here is quite fond of doing, of having grammatical constructions which mirror two different groups of people in order to highlight the differences between them. And in this case, the grammatical construction we're talking about here is the accusative and a genitive, the accusative indicating a property, the genitive to indicate the group or the person whose property it is, and then saying that this is forawisan, it excels in alem alamanam, among all societies. So that's the rhetorical device that the Gothic is using in this passage. It's quite interesting to see that at work. So, on to this next one. Ith jene in unselins sinesos balfin ise ni ustulandans mit hattisa anhofun vitra ins quitandans, ive jachius affersidesiuth. Se, jo ens hun thise rike galovidevi imma etho thise farisee alia so manari, thei ni kunun widoth, fraquitane sind. So, this means from if to quitandans, what this means is, meanwhile, those men, if yene, so I think, in unselins sinesos, on account of their, and that's their own, by the way, sinesos, on account of their own unholiness, balthin ise, that's the boldness of them, and that's referring to the group of people who were accusing the Pharisees, basically. Ni ustulandans, not tolerating. Mithatiza, with hatred, basically. Andhofun, they answered, witra ins, against them, quitandans, saying. So from start to finish, it's meanwhile, or nonetheless, those men not tolerating the boldness of those men on account of their own unholiness. So this is saying that the Pharisees didn't have the patience because they themselves were unholy, so they couldn't tolerate the audacity of being challenged on their authority. So then, not tolerating the boldness on account of their own unholiness, answered with hatred against them, saying, Iveachius af erzidesiuth. Iveach is even if, Jus af erzidesiuth, you all are heretical, or you are deceived, you are silly. Se, behold, jach ens hun these rike galovidevi ima. If anyone, your enshun, these rike, of these princes, galovidevi ima, should believe in him, because when you have Yod is a sort of word related to Yahweh, and it triggers a conditional here. So it is if he would believe galovidedi, and which is a subjunctive verb, and then galovion as a verb takes a dative as its object. So they would believe in him. Ethothise pharisee. So this is if any one of these princes or of these Pharisees should believe in him. Alia so malari, except for the multitude. Theini kunonuitoth, those who do not know the law, fraquitanesin, they are cursed or they are condemned. So this is an interesting way of phrasing it. But basically, what the context of this is that the Pharisees were asked why they weren't bringing Jesus in to stand trial before them, because he was, in the view of Jewish people who believed he was falsely claiming to be the Messiah, Jesus was committing heresy. The Pharisees respond that, and they sort of double down. So they condemn anybody who believes in Jesus in order to, I guess, show that they actually are tough on these kinds of crimes in a sense. And that's why they say, even if you guys are deceived, if any one of these kings or Pharisees, except this crowd who do not know the law, this is the Jews who are ignorant of the old law, should believe in that man, should believe in Jesus, they will be condemned. So I'll go from start to finish and read a translation of it, and hopefully you guys can get a sense of how it's working here. So, meanwhile, those men, not tolerating the boldness of those men, responded with hatred on account of their own unholiness against those men, saying, even if you all are deceived, behold, if a single one of these princes or of these Pharisees should believe in him, except for that multitude, those whom do not know the law, they shall be condemned. That's that sentence. On to this one. Fwch van mit betrin thwerchins rorivedun, in a thami liucandans bigitanda. I ni ens hunrike etho parisee galovidevi ima, at Nicodemo bi grechs negudis quimandin at ima in nacht, jach myth balthin for sunya in sakandin, jach quitandin ive withoth unsa stoyeth manan. And then the fragment of the Skeireins actually cuts off, so we don't know what it says. In theory, I actually do have the pictures of the Skeireins, and I could have a look at it, but it's very difficult to read, as you guys can see if you look at the first video that we did in this series. So, Fwchthan myth betrin thwerchin radivedun means and those things then radivedun, they spoke myth betrin, with bitterness, thwerchins, of anger. I love that word, thwerchi. It's a fun one. In thami liogandans bigitanda, in which bigitanda, they are found. This is one of those things that make Gothic unique among the Germanic languages, that it has those passive verb endings. Bigitanda is the unda ending here that's passive. liugandans, lying or liars. So what this means is then they said those things with bitterness of anger, in which they are found to be liars. And so what they're saying is that the, the act of saying those things and that the princes would be condemned shows that the Pharisees were liars. I ni ens hun rike the Pharisee galobidedi imma. Now, when it is followed by a subjunctive verb, as it is here, normally it indicates purpose or intent. So in this case, it means so that ni ens hun, nobody, rike the Pharisee, of the princes or of the Pharisees, galobidedi imma, so that none of the princes or the Pharisees would believe in him, imma. And that, of course, is Jesus. At Nicodemo bigarechs negudis quimandin. So this is all actually a single thing from at Nicodemo all the way to quimandin. So with Nicodemus, quimandin, coming, bigarechsne, according to the prophecy, gudis, of God. At ima, now in this case it means to him rather than with him. In nacht, during the night, yach mithbalthin, with boldness, for sunya, for the truth, in sakandin, sort of arguing essentially, yach quitandin im, and speaking to them, ive widot unsar stoyeth manan, if our law judges a man. And so just something to point out about this, we might notice the same word being used here. So the men who were accusing the Pharisees for not bringing in Jesus before them are accused of having balthin, right? They have boldness. And this is framed in a negative way here, right? That these are like impatient, precocious, impudent men. Whereas here it's contrasted with Nicodemus, who is, it appears, doing it in good things. So Balthin here has the meaning not so much of rashness or recklessness, but maybe boldness and courage. And it's an interesting contrast they've got going on here. So Nicodemus is coming on account of the prophecy of God with boldness, and he is in sakandin for sunya. He is arguing for the truth. This is, of course, Saint Nicodemus, and speaking to them. Ive witoth unsar stoyeth manan. If our law judges a man, and there is a degree also there's an element also of using the word ive, because in the previous one, the Pharisees themselves said ive. So there's a Nicodemus is using a conditional, speaking to the Pharisees, arguing for the truth, using their own words against them. And this is one of the ways in which the Skeireins is using its grammar to help illustrate and bring the story to life. So I'll read this from start to finish. So this is after the Pharisees have said that anyone who believes in Jesus will be cursed. Then they spoke those things with bitterness of anger, in that which they are found to be liars, so that not anyone of the princes or of the Pharisees would believe in him, with Nicodemus coming on account of the prophecy of God to him in the night and arguing with boldness for the truth and saying to them, to the Pharisees, if our law judges a man, and then the fragment cuts off. So we go on to the next bit. And again, we don't have the full bit of this sentence, unfortunately, because the fragment is cut off. But starting here, it reads, At jenem quitandam fatini ens hun physique jach farisei galovida. In ni frathiandans thati zarechtis fariseus was, jach raginis jurei, jach ens rike us technits, ustem fraquitannam was galovians froyen du gasachte jenese unseliens for ina rodians. So, Let's go from at yenam all the way to galovida here. At yenam quitandam, with those men saying, Thatini ens hun thisericeach pharisee galovida, that not a single one of these princes and of these Pharisees. Now, there's an important distinction here. So it's thati here. It is not e on its own. And thati normally means that. And the verb here is actually indicative, not subjunctive. So galovida is like he believed. So they're saying nobody of these princes and Pharisees believed. And that's important because previously what they had said, what the Pharisees had actually said, is that should anyone, yo galovidevi, which is subjunctive. So if any of the princes or Pharisees should believe in him, they will be condemned. And here they have just said that nobody does believe. So they've said that, and they are, in their own boldness, right? The Pharisees are saying, because we have said that anyone who believes in Jesus will be condemned, nobody does believe in him. None of the princes or the Pharisees do believe in him. Ni frathiandans. They were not understanding thati sa rechtis Phariseos was, that man truly Phariseos was. He was a Pharisee, Yachraginis Jurei, and he was an advisor, Raginis Jurei of the Jews, Yach ens reke us technits, and one of the princes demonstrated us them fraquitanam from among those who were condemned Waskalovians, he was believing Freuen in the Lord. Now, just notice here that we have the verb galovida here, and then we have Waskalovians. So I think there's a distinction being made here in that I think that they could have just used it, right? Because de facto this action is happening in the past, but I think they are separating it into was and golovians using the present participle to show that by using the present nominative masculine participle, which would describe Nicodemus, right, who is a Pharisee and a counselor and a prince, one of the princes, I should say, using this to describe him, because Golovians grammatically agrees with all of those nouns, the Pharisee, the counselor, the one of the princes, because if it agrees with all of those things, it sort of helps grammatically and linguistically to equate the two. So rather than just saying he believed, it's saying he was one who was believing. He was one of the believers. And I think that does a lot to highlight the unity of these things, that even though Nicodemus is a Pharisee and a counselor or whatever, he is nonetheless believing, Freuen, in the Lord. And he was rodant, he was speaking, duga sachte, for an argument, for a narrative, jenese unselins, of the goodness, of the unholiness of those men, for ina, for Christ or on behalf of Christ. So this is a really funny bit of the narrative, basically, where they've said that nobody is that none of the princes or Pharisees shall believe in Jesus, and anyone who does will be condemned. But they didn't know that Nicodemus was in the city, and he had been arguing for Christ and speaking the truth of the gospel all of this time. So, from start to finish, this means with those men saying that not any one of these princes and of these Pharisees believed in Christ, not understanding that that man truly was a Pharisee, and he was a counselor of the Jews, and one of the princes, indicated out of those who had been condemned, he was believing in the Lord, speaking for him as an example of their unholiness. So again, syntax here is, as usual, complicated, but it tells a really interesting story using the Gothic language in this way. And now we're on to the very last sentence of the Skeireins. Oh my god. If east ni ustulandans thogasach anhofen quitandans, Ive fu us Galileais, usoki sehu thati. So, meanwhile, those men not enduring or not tolerating vorgesacht, that reproach or that argument basically, anhofen quitandans, they answered saying, Iveach fu us Galilea is, if indeed you are from Galilee, usoki, sort of seek out or argue or demonstrate, sehu, and see, thati, that, and then this is done. That's we can't finish the sentence because it cuts out, the fragment cuts out, and then that is in fact the end of the Skeireins. That's like, yeah, that's all that I had. So thank you guys so much if you have come and if you have watched this series from the very start to the very finish, reading through. We have now read through the entirety of the Skeireins, or at least of the leaves of the Skeireins that we are aware of in the present day and which we have surviving to read. So I really hope you guys have enjoyed this exploration of the only really bit of Gothic literature aside from the Gothic Bible. I personally had a great time doing it. If you want me to teach you Gothic or any of the other languages that I do here on this channel, you can join my Patreon, which will be linked in the description of this video. And do just note that aside from the Learn Gothic Through Art series, which are going to be releasing slowly on my channel after this video, there will not be any more Gothic videos unless I might possibly do a series like this with the Skeireins, reading through Paul's second letter to the Corinthians, which is the only completely attested book of the Gothic Bible that we have surviving. I might do a video series reading through that. So if you guys would want me to do that, let me know in the comment sections, and I can do that because it's very easy and I already have those slides available. So yeah, if you want me to do a video series like what I've done here for the Skeireins, reading through 2 Corinthians, do just let me know and I will try my best to do that. And I hope you guys enjoy this series, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye everyone.